I'm heard a comment about the readings from my friend Kathy. Her comment was, I hope the preacher can make something out of this because I don't understand it. And she was talking about our gospel reading. Actually, we need to go back to Philippians first to understand this gospel reading. We have Paul going into this particular church and talking to these people or through a letter. And what he said to them is, first of all, to the two leaders of the church, stop fighting. Stop pulling the church apart. Just stop. You should be of the same mind and the same spirit. And then he goes on to say how much he loves all of the church and all the people in the church. And how all of us should be that way. And now we get to a gospel reading. A gospel reading of Jesus telling a parable. And sometimes I think what we forget in parables is that they are stories. Stories God told for the purpose of people's learning. Because we learn well from stories. If you don't believe me, think about Little Red Riding Hood. Didn't we all learn to stay away from the big bad wolf? You know? We learn that things can happen, Hansel and Gretel. Don't go into a house you don't know and take a bite out of it because you'll end up with supper. We've learned different things from stories. At this time and place, Jesus was telling a story about what rich people did, so we'd understand. What they did is they had these big elaborate weddings, and they would invite all the people of the city who had the same type of financial needs, each and every one of them. They would invite them in to this wedding hall where they're going to have this huge banquet. Sorry, Steve, this isn't going to work today. And what would happen then is they would bring gifts for the son and all of this, but it was a celebration of the next generation coming up. The people that he invited would be very much like the Sadducees and the Pharisees of that time, where they thought they were the rulers. If we put it in today's term, look at marriage equity at this point. Who's holding it up? Think about it. We have a 5th District Court that hasn't seen fit to even rule on it yet, where all the other states around have. What's holding it up? We have all those people from all those churches. It's an election year. They're called the Bible Belt. And they're all against it. So what is happening to the politicians? They're scared. They're scared they're not going to get reelected. The people of that time were scared that they were not going to be the richest people or the people that called the rules. So what did they do? They ignored it. What do? Sometimes we ignore things. They decided to destroy his servants. And so what does the man do? Or in this case, what would Jesus do? Jesus opened the table up for each and every person. And when the establishment would not accept it, what did he do? He went into the streets and he invited all people, good, bad, indifferent, to come to the banquet. Weddings in the Bible are always a reflection of the last times. Because what is the church called? Does anybody No. The bride of Christ. So he invited all people in to be the bride of Christ. All of them that came, and it's a song that the choir sings quite often. If my robe is white, white enough, if I'm pure enough, I don't know if I believe that. What I believe is that God opens the gate for each and every person, no matter who you are, and you're invited in. You're invited into God's family. And what God expects for you when you're in God's family is the same thing Paul was talking about. Be of like mind. Love all of those around you. Those are the white robes that we will wear as God's children. Or in my case, a rainbow robe, whichever you choose. But you be dressed appropriately. How are we dressed appropriately to go? Think about it. We're told over and over again to love one another. Love one another. That's the clothing that God is looking for in us, is the ability to love one another. So one man snuck in who apparently didn't have on that ability to love one another. And he was thrown out. That was the point of Jesus' story. That we as God's children are required to love one another. It's not a choice, it's a requirement to love one another. Now, preacher, how do I do that? There are some people in this world that I just have a hard time loving. I think each and every one of us will be able to say that about somebody in our lives. God says, love one another. One of the tricks I use when I meet somebody that I just have a hard time with, loving, even liking, I look for that one thing about them I can love. I love them because God created them, and for no other reason. I love them because God created them. That is what we are required to do. We're required to stop the bickering. And we're required to look upon each other as a gift from God. To learn to love those gifts from God. It's not an easy thing to do. One of the things I love most about going to these network gatherings and driving endlessly, it seems, is the fact that I am required to love those people when I get there, whether I like them or not. I'm required to love them. One of the things we did this week that is something I'd like to do in the church is they made up little cards with a little prayer on them, with a blank space where you filled in your name. And they threw them in a basket, and everybody chose one to take home with them, to read that prayer for that person each and every day. Well, I get somebody I don't even know. But so far, I've been reading that prayer for them each and every day. Some people got people they don't like. And they started reading that prayer each and every day. You know what they found out? That after a while, they started liking them. And they started to love them. So that's what the rich man was doing. He said, if you don't want to be a part of this loving community, you don't have to be. You'll be thrown out. But if you want to be a part of that loving community, come dressed with love, forgiveness, and the ability accept people from where they're at. It's a parable. It's a story. A story that should ring in our hearts. It should really ring in our hearts for a couple of reasons. Not only that there's people we don't like in this world that we need to learn to like, but the fact that if we call ourselves Christians, we need to know what that means. And that's what Jesus was saying. What does it mean to be my disciple? It means that you're going to love your God with all your heart, all your mind, and your soul. And you're going to love your neighbor like yourself. We need to look around and find those neighbors. You know, those ones that kind of just are there in the neighborhood, but we may go like this when we drive by. We have no idea what their names are, who they are, if they're in need. Do we look around to find those folks? Do we love them? We see someone hurt out on the street. Do we stop? Or do we just pick up our cell phone, dial 911, and drive on by because you see we don't want to be involved? Loving God means taking chances. Loving our neighbor means taking chances. Chances that they may not want to know us. Chances that they don't like us. But as Paul said to the two women that were fighting, become of like mind. Think of what the community needs. Think of what we need. How we want to be accepted. And accept others the same way. In Jesus' name.